Hello and welcome to On the House, where we talk about movies, TV shows, and video games. And would you like to play a game?
I would.
Oh, how about Tony Hawk Pro Skater?
Sure thing.
All
Then just
right,
quick edit in some footage of it and then just cut right back.
Tony Hawk. Well, folks, thank you for joining us for this episode of Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Wait, Dave, I'm being informed that that is not what the title of this episode is.
No, and this is a bit of a different one for us because while we have been able to cover new releases ever since HBO Max was a thing, and this was the first one that was a theater only release that I managed to catch, mainly because I was able to get a screening where I was the only one in there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But that poses a problem because I was not able to see this movie. So, folks, we're going to try something different where if there's ever a film where we definitely want to cover, but one of us hasn't had the chance to, we're going to do it sort of more of a interviewee style where one of us will serve as kind of the questionnaire, just asking some questions. And the other one just kind of works as, well, telling us what their thoughts were.
And also we agree, like, if whatever one it is, like, it would be one that the other person wouldn't mind having spoiled.
Yes, so don't worry about that. If you wanted some deeper dive questions, Dave has your back.
And vice versa, if you see one that I'm not able to, I'm completely fine with spoilers. I had basically every big like MCU, Star Wars, DC film spoiled.
Yeah, Dave and I are very opposite ends of the spectrum with this, where Dave doesn't mind spoilers, and I've honestly gotten to the point where I'll only watch the original trailers for things. I won't watch any subsequent trailers.
Okay. Okay, but you're the interviewer this time around, so what are your initial questions?
Well, let's start off with why is this movie called Spiral and not Saw 9? 8? 9?
Nine.
9.
Okay, from what I can recall, after the eighth film, Jigsaw, came out in 2017 and did modestly well, there's kind of a bit of an uncertainty what direction the next installment of the franchise was going to go in. But suddenly in 2019, we got the news that Chris Rock had pitched an idea to the studio as he was apparently a really big fan of the franchise, and they were able to come up with this film that's about a different killer, but it follows like the Jigsaw like trap game motif, and it's clearly a spin-off, but it doesn't retcon any of the past installments. Like it's it's another Saw movie, yes, but it's its own separate thing at the same time. Like no one from the past films, not even Tobin Bell, is in this one at all.
Because if I remember right, didn't he die in like the fourth movie or something?
Uh, Third movie, but it's the Saw franchise from the beginning was all about them flashbacks.
Good old flashbacks. So I'd say my first question is if they're going with a new title, a new lead character, and all that, what makes this different from past Saw movies?
Right at the bat, I would say, like, for the most part, there isn't so much a main game as there wasn't this, like, whether it be one person going through a series of traps or a group. Like, there's people getting abducted, and there's, like, a common motif among the killer's motive, but it's not like they're trapped at one place. It's taking place all over the city and over multiple days, too. So that's kind of a distinct from how the earlier films worked.
Okay. Now, that being said, with that being made different, is this a change you like, or do you kind of prefer the setup of the older films?
I don't mind the difference, but like I feel this film is only it can only be so much different because it's still a Saw movie, and that in the sense that I'm not so much complaining that it doesn't follow the formula, but it's actually hard to deviate from the formula because eventually in the last act, like for maybe the final 20 minutes, it does kind of sort of rush a classic main game structure where Chris Rock's character gets kidnapped and he gets sent somewhere and he encounters two traps along the way.
Okay, so it kind of studio mandate popped in towards the end, basically.
Not so much a mandate, but just when it starts to more resemble the classic films and structure.
Okay.
Because I mean, they did. The director of this is Darren Lynn Bousman, who directed Saw 2, 3, and 4, and the writers were the ones who wrote the previous installment. So it's not entirely new blood on this.
Okay, so it's kind of like how when they did the Amazing Spider-Man reboot, they kept the writers from the original series. Yeah, people
Yeah,
forget that.
so had I.
But anyways, so the selling point in Saw has never really been the characters or the story. It's been the traps. How did they do with the traps in this one?
I would say this is an entry that goes for quality over quantity. Like there's a total of 5 traps in this, and usually I'd say 6 is the minimum they have. But the ones they have are very they stick with you, like the opening trap that they officially posted a clip of, where the guy is stuck on a platform and on the middle of the subway tracks, and there's a clamp around his tongue, and he has to basically jump off and sever his tongue, or he gets splattered by the train.
Train. We seem to be dealing with trains that trap people an awful lot here lately.
And there's another one where a guy's in a pool of water with like a device around his head and these clamps around his fingers, where he has to like let his fingers be ripped off, or eventually he's going to be electrocuted.
How?
Mhm.
So were those the highlights for you, or are you not wanting to say what the big show stealer is?
There's some I'll save for towards the end of this interview.
Okay. So I think what surprised a lot of people is that they got Chris Rock of all people in this, and not only that, that he's apparently a fan of this, just because Chris Rock is definitely not somebody you associate with, well, making too many movies lately for one, but with horror films especially.
Well, I know that comedians like taking a turn for more dramatic works is something we have precedence for. I mean, there was Jordan Peele's whole career, and I think people have liked Adam Sandler's more serious movies.
Oh yeah,
And
Uncut Gems is phenomenal.
uh, I guess I've heard good things about Chris Rock's performance in the recent season of Fargo.
I don't watch Fargo, so I'm not familiar with it.
Well, I mean, here, like it's like early on, there's a lot of comedic scenes with him. Like it feels very much like he was just like using some unused clips from his stand-up routines at some points. And for more dramatic moments in the first half, it's kind of iffy, but especially towards the end, I think he gets better.
Okay. Now, would you say he's playing a character, or is it just kind of Chris Rock light?
In going expanding on what I said in my last answer, it starts out Chris Rock light, but it becomes more of a character later.
Okay. And I have to ask, because the trailers showed that Sam Jackson was in this. Is Sam Jackson in this for very long, or is this kind of the typical Sam Jackson in a trailer of he's in it, but only for a couple minutes?
I would say he's in for a little bit. He's more than a glorified cameo. He has multiple scenes, but I think the trailers give the impression that he has more scenes than he does.
Okay.
Like it's to use a comparison, I saw somebody else it's not Joker and Suicide Squad levels of misleading, but he definitely has a role, but he's more in the background.
Okay. And then that being said, are there any other characters that really stand out throughout this film, or is it just kind of the traps are the star, as they kind of should be with these films?
Well, there's a Chris Rock's partner who's played by Max Minghella. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that pronunciation, but I remember him. He was from that film Horns from like 2014, that adaptation of a book from like Stephen King's Son where they had Daniel Radcliffe in it. I actually really like that, and that's worth checking out. He plays like the younger rookie cop who's getting into the force and being all optimistic, and I just realized like they're having Chris Rock specifically be the older cop, and man, he's like in his mid-50s. Jesus.
Yeah. I saw a thing where film we actually did a podcast on somewhat recently, A Knight's Tale turned 20.
Mm-hmm.
And that just made me go, oh man, I'm not ready to be old.
And it's clear from the like very first scene that this is about like a corrupt cops, and it's the police force in this movie is like one of the most corrupt you'll see in any movie.
Okay. Is that a big element of the film, or just kind of a background setting on why?
Oh, it's a big element, and to the point I'm honestly surprised that there weren't more traps, simply because there were characters who I thought they were setting up to end up in one at some point that didn't. Like, or it's possible that there were some characters being saved to be killed off in a sequel.
Okay. Speaking of which, is this the type of film where you'd want a sequel out of it, or is this?
I mean, there's definitely sequel potential, and I'd be curious to see who they could get in the follow up, because, like, even though it's the ninth Saw movie, it's not really a continuation of the eighth. And I've heard some talks that theoretically there could be like separate sequels to both this and like and then a proper like Saw sequel, because
That'd be something different. Like, I don't think we've ever had that before, where the spin-off and where there's the spin-off series and still the main series. Normally that's very much at. Yeah, that'd be interesting if they did do that.
at the same time, though, I could see how if you tweaked the script a bit, you could have just had this work as a proper Saw 9.
Okay. So
I would say this is a case where it's different, but it's not all that different.
So calling it Book of Saw, you think is justified and not just for marketing purposes?
Well, I read that in I guess the last week before release, they had for at least the theaters, they had the title be written as Spiral Saw, just because I think they wanted to make sure people knew the Saw connection.
Gotcha.
It's sort of like how after the first week of Birds of Prey's box office, the theaters listed the title as just Birds of Prey Harley Quinn.
When they should have listed that movie as somehow this makes Suicide Squad look confident.
I actually liked it.
I wasn't a fan of that movie. But we're not here to talk about that. So, trying to think what else to ask you without seeing the film itself. I can't really go too deep into questions, but would you want to see, and obviously, if he can't for certain reasons, I don't know how you'll be able to answer this, but would you like to see Chris Rock return for a sequel?
Oh yeah, I mean, I just kind of interested to learn there was a big name celebrity who was actually really into these movies, and I could feel like he could lead another movie. I'm not fully sure what direction I would take the story in, where it leaves off.
Yeah, the Saw series has kind of been like, I don't think we really had any huge stars come out of it now that I'm thinking about it. So, but like, it's been able to get some big names in the past. I mean, the first film, granted it was the original movie, but it had Danny Glover in it.
Mm-hmm. And Carrie Elways.
Thank you. I was blanking on his name. I was kind of stalling, going, crap. What's his name?
And the other guy in the bathroom from the first one grew up to, well, not grew up, he's an adult, would later be the director of the Invisible Man remake.
Oh, right. I forgot he did that.
Mm-hmm.
Because wasn't he the co-writer as well?
Yeah.
I forgot he acted in the film as well.
Mm-hmm. One of my amusing bits of trivia is that for all the like minor trap characters are only in one scene, like one of the victims in Saw 6 was Eddie from Family Matters.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, I am a diehard fan. This is a franchise I will always go see, and even if I thought the movie started to suck, I would not give up on them.
So, I was going to say something. I had a point,
And
but I don't anymore.
if you want to start asking spoilery questions, you can do that whenever.
Okay, who's the father?
Well, Samuel L. Jackson's character is Chris Rock's father.
Holy crap, there is a father.
Uh-huh.
So, with there not being as many traps in this, would you say the quality of them makes up for it, or is it kind of, I could have gone for 2 or 3 more situation?
I would say if there were one or two more, like it would have been perfectly balanced. And but I'd say there's not a weak one among the ones we do get. Like there's one where the police like captain, she's on a strapped to this table and she's going to start having hot wax poured on her face, and to escape she basically has to like sever her spinal cord with this spike on the table.
Ow.
And this other one where there's okay, that's 3 down. So you want me to spoil them all because I got 3 down out of 5 already.
Yeah, go ahead.
Then toward like once Chris Rock gets kidnapped, he finds somebody like an ex-cop like who was his former partner who he turned in for being a dirty cop. He's like suspended by a chain, and then there's like this conveyor belt where these like just glass bottles are being like dropped into this like glass shredder thing, and the other guy is just being like basically shot with glass shards.
You know, I can tell these films haven't lost their touch because I'm wincing at every single one of the traps you're describing to me. So that's always was a concern of mine with the films of once they kind of lose creativity, what's there going to be? But hey, they still got it apparently.
I mean, it's the same logic of Fast and Furious that the more over the top they got, I think the more memorable they became.
Yeah.
And then the final trap, which was glimpsed in the last trailer, like Samuel L. Jackson, like he's suspended in these wires and there's like syringes in him, like slowly draining his blood. But at first it seems like that's kind of underwhelming, but like there's a little extra twist at the end where, okay, I'll answer this separately. I felt the killer reveal was incredibly obvious, but I think it was made up for by the fact I think the person who plays the killer did a good job. But then, like, okay, the killer tells Chris Rock, like, your dad, like, was in charge of the police force when they were doing all this horrible shit. Like, you have a bullet with one gun, you can either shoot me or save him. Like, you can shoot this target that will release him. Like, Chris Rock shoots the target and gets Samuel L. Jackson down. And he pulls out the syringes, but we see earlier that the killer like armed a second trap, and like because the like SWAT team's like breaking in when they trigger a wire, it like this because he's still attached to like the wires like a marionette. Like even though Chris Rock pulled the syringes out, Samuel L. Jackson's hoisted back up, and because the killer's motive was that his dad was killed like by a corrupt cop because his dad was willing to testify against the corrupt cop, and the cop just shot him and claimed, oh, he was aiming at me. He was pointing a gun at me. Like the wires make Samuel L. Jackson like they have a gun like emerge and they point like a marionette. They have him point him towards the SWAT team so they think he's a threat. And you can imagine what happens next.
Yeah, I got a pretty solid guess.
Mm-hmm. I mean that almost makes up like for the obvious killer twist that how the final chapter work wasn't made clear at first. I think that was a nice tiny reveal that worked in his favor.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate how they still like played the music cue that would play during the final twist of all the other movies. The dun dun dun. Dun, 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 dun.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some good callbacks throughout here, is what you're saying.
Yeah, they even do when Chris Rock like first gets kidnapped in the final act, it almost looks like they're going to do he has to saw off a limb again, but this time he's just able to grab a bobby pin and free himself.
Okay, that's funny. So I do have to ask, though, because it reappeared multiple times, does the backwards bear trap make an appearance?
Yeah. No, it does not.
Oh.
Like, except for the original Jigsaw, like, none of the past characters are name dropped.
So it is truly a semi-reboot, then.
Yeah, it doesn't retcon anything, and it could like serve as an entry point as like how to get people into these movies, like without having to spoil everything in the past. But
okay,
I mean, we're in a 9-film franchise where the main antagonist has been dead for 2/3 of it.
Yeah, somebody was kind of wishing we didn't think these films would go on for this long.
I mean, the one thing I always admired about Saw was how, and I can understand people saying it didn't really work out, but at least there was an attempt to have an ongoing story. Like there were plot points being set in films that they were intending to resolve later, and
yeah, that's definitely something that you gotta give credit for. I mean, especially with what was it? Hostel was the big copycat at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, aside from killing off one character who survived the last film, it kind of had more of a Friday the 13th approach of every film's essentially a standalone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, if somebody wasn't a fan of the original Saw movies, do you think this would get them into it?
Mm-hmm.
Or at least they would be into this one? Or is it very much, what if you're into this stuff or not?
Well, I think the fact they went with the social commentary aspect might make it seem more appealing if one already wasn't a fan of the first. Like, I think if you like the first one and some of the sequels, like, it'd be worth checking this one out. Like, if you always hated the series, I don't think this would change your mind, though. I would say out of all the, because this was a comparison people made from the beginning, like this is the one that does with the more police procedural structure. It does feel more like a 7 takeoff compared to the rest of the franchise.
I've heard that comparison from a couple reviews I've seen, so seems to be the reoccurring thoughts on this film.
Mhm.
It's Seven, but with Saw and Chris Rock.
You know what? Bringing Adam Sandler for the next one.
Make him the killer. Have him do his typical Adam Sandler voices for the what's the name of the puppet?
Billy. That even though it doesn't actually get said in the movies.
Thank you.
And don't worry, since Samuel L. Jackson in this, you do get a quota of motherfuckers.
You know, somewhere on the internet, there's a video where someone just super edited every single time he says motherfucker. And I am thankful for that person for taking the time to do it.
Well, actually, just last night, I saw a video on YouTube, a supercut of every PG-13 movie use of the word fuck.
You know, I keep seeing that recommended in my videos. I just haven't watched it.
Mm-hmm. And to steal a comment somebody made on like the subreddit, like if you were to tell me 10 years ago, like there would be a Saw movie with Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson, that would sound kind of like just a sketch some comedy show would do, but
Yeah, it's kind of. You remember a few years ago when The Rock was hosting SNL, and they did a sketch of a live action reboot of Bambi where it was essentially a Fast and Furious movie.
yeah.
That does kind of give me that vibe initially.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I love how before he voiced Chucky in the Child's Play remake, Mark Hamill voiced Chucky in a Robot Chicken sketch like 14 years prior.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah.
I still haven't seen the remake. I mean, sorry, Mark Hamill, but that was one reboot that I just didn't have a desire to see.
I wasn't like looking forward to it. I didn't hate it though. I would actually say it's probably among the better of the 80s remakes.
Okay.
And
I mean,
I
it
will
does
say
have Audrey Plaza in it, which I'll see. Which I should probably watch just because I love seeing her in movies. So
it's definitely one of the reboots that I would say managed to have its own identity.
okay. Which is what they need, with the exception of the Friday the 13th. I just wanted another Friday the 13th, so I quietly pretend that fits into the canon. The very, very loose, clearly we don't care about it canon.
But overall, I would say I like this movie. I'm not sure where I would rank it among the other Saw movies in the franchise, but I'm looking forward to watching this again on home video. And the Saw franchise has been one where I always listen to the commentaries, just because I like finding out how they were made and what plot points changed or how the trap scenes were filmed. And
now here's a question. Since these were his babies and he's gone on to become essentially this decade's I think I'd probably best compare him to Carpenter. Would you want James Wong to return to the series ever, or do you think he's better off just doing his own stuff now?
I mean, it would be really neat if he came back, and it probably would never be able to make a profit, but I would love to see what a high budget Saw movie would look like.
And I can't even imagine that.
I mean, I think this had the highest budgeted series, and it was still only 20 million.
Honestly, I'm glad these films still get made, just for nothing else. We don't need every movie to be worth 300 billion. Let the smaller films still exist.
And I think even if this underperforms just because of like the being released still mid-pandemic, I could imagine they would still try another one, maybe just like a proper like Saw 9 or Saw 10, but just going back to the old storyline.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, I mean, this is the second semi reboot that they've done, so you can definitely tell there's still a desire to keep them going.
Yeah, this is a franchise I would not mind just perpetually existing.
Now, let's just avoid any major lawsuits that keep it tied up in legal battles for years. Friday the 13th.
I still love that story where did you hear that apparently like LeBron James wanted to produce one at some point?
Oh, yeah. LeBron James has his own production company and he loves the series apparently, but this stupid lawsuit has killed off like 8 or 9 proposed sequels at this point.
Well, at least like I guess with Saw, it's another case of always being made by the same studio or having some people behind the scenes in each film constantly.
Yeah.
Mhm. I mean, like the first 8 Halloween movies all had the same producer before he died.
Hmm.
So, and I should ask you, does what I've described make you want to check this out when you get the chance?
You know, what you've described makes me want to watch it when it comes out on DVD. I was never the biggest Saw fan. Like, I enjoyed the first couple ones, but kind of, they're not films that I ever really felt the need to go back to, you know?
Uh, I, if I was ranking overall franchises, I might actually put Saw in my top 3 series.
I think I remember you mentioning that to me before. It's
Mhm.
not that I have anything against the films. I just, it's not one I fell in love with, you know?
Mhm.
I mean, it's not like the Wrong Turn series films that I absolutely think are god awful, you know?
Like I never realized that that series managed to get like 6 or even more.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you find out that Amityville has had like 30 sequels.
Mhm.
I'm not exaggerating. There's like either 25 or 31 sequels. I forget which number it is.
I mean, didn't the people involved in the original house eventually confess it was all fake anyway?
Uh, so the father who was behind the whole scam never did, but like his stepkids came out and said, "Look, our stepdad was abusive. He made us lie about this. He's a terrible human being. Don't believe this shit." And then yet you still get those paranormal investigator shows that try pulling it off like this was all true.
I mean, like people love the Conjuring movies, even though those were based on liars. But
Yeah. I
which
could make a joke about, well, people do like politicians still, and they're nothing but liars, but I'm not going to.
and it was so weird to be in a theater again.
I was gonna say, what was having popcorn like?
I didn't go for snacks.
Ah, I was gonna say it's been so long since I had that.
And actually, it wasn't like one of the smaller theaters I had to myself. We had like the big jumbo screen one where I was the only one in there.
Oh, nice.
And we had trailers for Venom 2, Quiet Place 2, The Conjuring 3, and this one called The Prodigy, with which also has Samuel L. Jackson, I think.
Okay.
But I mean, I guess I'm glad I got to see this, and here's hoping for more Saw.
Indeed. Well, Dave, thank you for taking the lead on this little experiment we're doing.
You're welcome. I'm always glad to help, and I'm glad I was able to make this sound appealing to you.
Oh, definitely. Like I said, I'll be checking it out once it's on DVD.
Mhm.
And folks, let us know what you think of this new format and what you think of just this film in general. If you've seen it, if you haven't seen it, just comment down below, and we'll see you next time.
We hope you enjoyed the game.